Hello, this is Stephen Owen. Yes, we're back with another Batman 66 episode review. Today we'll be reviewing the first ever supervillain team up, the Sandman Cometh. So without further ado, let's get into the review. So, for the first time ever in the series, we get a villain team up. Essentially, we open with this episode with the notorious Catwoman teaming up with a notorious criminal known as the Sandman, who is a notorious European criminal. He's very well known, but few people have ever encountered. But this is a villain that no one has ever encountered before. The two have teamed up to plan essentially a big crime together. But it's also revealed that the two essentially plan to double cross each other once the others have fulfilled their usefulness. So I like the premise that is started here. And everything seems to be going well until one of Catwoman's henchmen, or should I say henchwomen, leaves to go and get a delivery, but she knows it's too late, and we find out that this henchwoman is really an undercover cop who's in call with Police Commissioner Gordon. We find out that she's undercover to find out what Catwoman was up to, and when they find out that the Sandman's in town, they try to call up Batman and Robin. Only Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson are out of town. Realizing that they can't call them by the phone, they throw out the bat signal. Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson see it whilst camping, and they realize they're in quite the sticky wicket. We get the opening credits, and then we get back to the episode. Bruce and Dick know they can't do a mile hike at this time of day, but they knew they have to get back into town immediately. Just as that's happening, strange things are happening in Gotham. A woman in a nightgown sleeping in a mattress is taken away, and she's essentially becomes the biggest media, celebrity around. And this is all part of essentially the Sandman's plan to essentially lure a notorious Gothamite millionaire J. Pauline Spaghetti. I don't know where the name comes from, but it sounds just as ridiculous. Anyway, but fear not, Bruce Wayne and Dick do get back into town, get in contact with Police Commissioner Gordon, and get on the case. What they then do, they then start realizing who could be the Sandman's target with him in town, knowing that it has to do with someone who is deprived of sleep. The logical conclusion is that they have to find someone who fits that description. They come up with J. Pauline Spaghetti and head to her, essentially, apartment. The Sandman's there and uses mind control of his famous sleeping gas to turn her what is known as a sandwalker. What ends up happening, he then ransacks through her place and essentially gets photocopy materials of her stuff. Batman and Robin, however, do arrive at the penthouse, but the Sandman have a conversation trying to reveal that this Dr. Somnambulist, the alias Sandman's using, is actually the notorious criminal, the Sandman, but she doesn't believe. When she turns around, the Sandman's gone. She is mad because for the first time ever she's had some sleep, and Batman and Robin have ruined it. She's asked them to leave, and they do. We then cut to Batman and Robin tracking down to the Sandman's hideout, where they wonder where the Sandman is. A bat fight breaks out. It's fun, but it's also not that creative. But the fight is still fun nonetheless. Anyway, Batman and Robin do end up losing, with Batman getting knocked out unconscious by essentially a bunch of mattresses, and Robin is sprayed with the Sandman's special, sleeping gas that turns him into a sleepwalker. Batman is then placed under death threat to be turned into a living mattress. It is a very poor death and not that creative, but I can't admit, for a person who's called the Sandman, it does fit very fittingly. Anyway, we then walk away with Batman essentially to be quilted into the mattress with a big sharp needle, and that's where we end our cliffhanger. Nothing really has changed with much of the main cast, and I really feel that something we're really starting to feel is the repetitiveness right now. I mean, Commissioner Gordon and Chief O'Hara are heavily relying on Batman and Robin, and this is the second time we get where essentially Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson are out of town, and essentially can't come to answer the call when essentially a new super criminal is in town. And Harriet and Alfred are fine as always, though I really wish there could be more screen time, especially with Aunt Harriet, as she's always, a delight to see. But what I like about this time is the villains, and for the first time ever since the movie, we've had a villain team up, which is something that is very, very different. The Sandman, played by Michael Rennie, hopefully that last name's been pronounced right. Now, what I already like about this character is, first off, we've already, for the so far majority of the season, we've been up against villains that everyone's heard of except us, but there's been occasions where they've heard of the criminal, but they've never met him, like Miles Parker being of the most prominent example of this season. The Sandman is essentially a notorious European criminal with a notorious criminal reputation. No one has met him. I like how Michael plays him as essentially a person that's an American kind of, a British person, a European person in American waters. He doesn't really understand everything as much, but he's also very calm and collective. But he is a criminal, and he is essentially going to be a backstabber. His gimmick is essentially derives from his name. You see, when you think of Sandman, the original term for that name was more in regards to sleep. Whether that came from, I do not know. But I like how he is essentially this person who causes people to sleep and essentially creates sleepwalkers, so essentially a form of mind control. It is really an inventive gadget and really makes the character rather interesting for me. I like how he's presented. His costume is very different, but also feels very fitting for this show. Again, I love how this guy is absolutely played and phenomenally, and also what makes him great. Now, in all honesty, he is really the main villain for this two-parter, but he does get a very well-known female accomplice. Julie Newmar is back as Catwoman. I'm surprised she returned this quick, considering we only saw her like what, at least not that, she hasn't been gone for that long. Literally, she was only not in the previous two-parter, but she's brought back, but nonetheless, it's great to bring her back. Something I've noticed here, Julie Newmar plays Catwoman more so how she was in Season 1 than so she was in Season 2. But I feel that's kind of appropriate. The Catwoman and Batman love relationship, I don't think would have worked in further progressing the plot of this episode. And I also like how she is willing to go along with this plan, but we know she plans to double-cross him, just as he's clearly going to double-cross her. I like how that is really interwoven into this story, and essentially what they are is essentially take over someone's fortune. I like how it's written very, 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 very well. The Sandman Cometh is, for me, I'm kind of divided. It introduces a lot of new things to the series. Villain team-ups, for starters. And I love the idea with essentially these two are essentially going to betray each other, but they're waiting for their time. And, waiting for their usefulness to be out. But essentially, there are some things that have still not yet changed, but also are kind of relying on heavily. I mean, we've already seen Batman be out of town once, and they're doing it again. We've already seen how heavily reliable Gordon and Chief O'Hara really are on Batman and Robin, and it kind of feels like that repetitiveness. Hell, I think the formula for their repetitive is really starting to wear out in this episode. I mean, think about it. A villain comes into town. Batman gets notified. He calls up Batman. They do some investigative work. Then there's a bat fight, which they lose and end up in the death trap. It's kind of getting very repetitive now. And it's really starting to sink in. And I think this, I like to think around the Joker episode, the freshness was starting to leave, even though there was some new things coming in post that episode. But I think this is really where the repetitiveness really stuck. Anyway, that's what the thing. It's a fun episode, I'll grant you that, but you can't deny that that the formula is starting to become stale here. And there we have it. That was The Sandman Cometh. Join us next time when we review the episode The Catwoman Goeth. Hopefully that is pronounced right. So tune in next time for the same Steven hour, the same Steven channel. Ladies and gentlemen, so long for now.